Video is one of the most immersive and engaging ways to capture your audience. Today we're going to talk about ways to create great video without breaking the bank. Behind all good video though is somebody who knows how to set everything up. And today I'm going to let Michael run you through his tips and tricks on how to set up a great video.
So the first thing to remember is that it doesn't matter if you're shooting on a $50,000 cinema camera or you're shooting on an iPhone. If your content is worthless to your audience, then it doesn't really matter. That's why it's super important that before you even pick up a camera, you've established a piece of content that's valuable to your customer and serves a purpose for your business.
As with all things, we want to start with why. Why are we doing this piece of content? Is it to create buzz? Is it to educate? Is it to inform the audience of something new and exciting coming? We need to understand the intention of the video before we start producing the video. So when we're producing a piece of content, relevancy becomes really important. So creating a piece of content that makes no sense to your end audience becomes a piece of garbage. So we want to make sure that there's relevancy in everything you're trying to do in alignment with the content that you're trying to produce. So have that in the back of your mind. How is this piece of content going to resonate with my audience? And how is it relevant to them?
So as we've mentioned before, you really don't need to break the bank buying expensive production equipment. It can be a very useful tool if you know how to use it and if the production calls for it. But for the most part, you'd be amazed at the quality of video that can come out of an iPhone. It's all about understanding the tools that you have and being smart about the production. Look for locations where you can take advantage of natural light. Overcast is great when you're shooting outdoors because it really softens the natural light and gives a great look. It's also important to consider the time of day that you're shooting your video. If you're shooting when the sun is directly above your subject, you're going to deal with a lot of awkward, harsh shadows on the face. Just one thing to consider when you're shooting outside is that you're probably going to have to be dealing with more outdoor noises. Think cars, birds, squirrels. It's just something to consider if you think that might be a concern for you. So as you can see, we're outdoors right now. There's no direct sunlight, but it's nice and bright, nice and evenly lit. And I'm going to be showing you an example of how this footage looks just shot on an iPhone. When you're shooting indoors, lighting can be a bit more challenging, but don't let that scare you. Look for locations with big windows and nice natural light. So now we're going to give you an idea of what indoor lighting, but with nice natural light looks like. And if you don't have access to that, just try to find a space where your subject is well lit in a nice clean area that allows the subject to stand out. If there's not enough light in the image, it's going to come out grainy and not sharp. Have a look at this comparison. Notice the image on the left is shot with nice pleasant light, whereas the image on the right is grainy and a little bit blurry. It's all about making the most of your space. When you start shooting videos, one of the most challenging things is taking the camera settings into your own hands. A lot of these smartphone manufacturers have a habit of dumbing down the camera settings to make it easier to use for most consumers. Now that's great when you're shooting quick snapshots, little family video clips, events, when you need to get the shot really quickly. But when you have the time to invest it in making great quality content, you're going to want to take those settings a little bit further. Here are some quick tips to maximize the quality of video that you can get from your smartphone. First of all, you're going to want to shoot at a high resolution if possible. Many smartphones now are actually capable of shooting up to 4K and even higher. Now, that's not to say you need to shoot 4K because most social media apps are still optimized for lower resolutions. But if the option is there, go for it because it's going to give you more room to edit in post. With that said, even just regular 1080p full HD is going to look great for your videos. Next, consider the frame rate. As you know, videos are comprised of a series of quickly moving images to give the illusion of motion. And the more images we put per second, known as the frame rate, the smoother the image appears. A lot of people get really excited and they push that frame rate as high as they can go. They put it up to 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, and it looks super smooth and crisp and there's no motion blur. But that's not necessarily what you want for your content. Most Hollywood movies are actually shot at 24 frames per second to give it a more cinematic look. And 30 frames per second is the standard in North America for broadcast television. That said, 60 frames per second might look great if you're shooting sports or any quick moving content, but it's important to consider what you need for your purpose. Just one thing to consider is the higher your frame rate, the less light is going to be able to be captured per frame, which means that in low light situations, you're going to deal with a lot more graininess and it won't be as sharp. So those settings are a great place to start. But if you're looking to step up your game without needing to make a huge investment in a new camera, consider some of the apps listed here, which are all very affordable and allow you to take more control over the settings in your phone's camera.
So here's a few tips that I like to use when I'm presenting or doing video that may also help you. First thing is being comfortable. A lot of people get very hesitant when they see the red blinking light on the camera going off. Set that aside. If you're gonna create video, just be comfortable, be yourself, put it out there. Don't worry about what everyone else is going to think. You gotta get past that and just start creating your videos the way you feel most comfortable. The last thing you want to do is put yourself out there and start talking about things that you have absolutely no clue about. For example, I would never start talking about politics or biology. Those aren't my expertise. So when you're putting yourself out there to produce a great piece of content, know that you should be the expert in that space and have that confidence going out there. Don't stretch yourself thin or put yourself in a position that you're going to get bombarded by all the trolls online. The next thing that I like to do is just give myself little cues, prompts that remind me of the subject or the topic that I want to talk about, because I want to keep it as organic as possible. Yeah, I'm going to mumble on some of my words sometimes, but whatever. I'm not here to create a Hollywood film. I'm here to get some content out that I feel is of value to my audience. So give yourself some visual cues. Don't try to memorize every last word and make it feel very rigid. Be authentic, be genuine, but give yourself little pointers to remember what it is and what subject to stay on top of. And remember, most importantly, this whole thing is a learning process. So if anybody's gonna criticize you for the imperfections in your video, you can tell them to fuck off. We're not Hollywood movie makers here. We're just doing the best to get some great content out that we feel is important for the audience to appreciate and get to know. Get better at creating videos, but don't assume your very first video is gonna be a masterpiece. You gotta keep working away at it. And as you work away at it, know your strengths and weaknesses and work towards getting those weaknesses strengthened. So before you go out and invest a whole bunch of money on lighting and cameras and sound equipment, do these three things. Learn your tools, find a great location, and go into the video with a lot of confidence. Win or lose, it's a start and it gets you out there. But remember, the most important thing out of all this is having great content. If you got any questions, you're not sure, feel free to reach out through NVISION.co, either to myself or Michael. We'd be happy to help address any questions you might have about video production. This is the conclusion. For editing's sake,